Speaking of major events at house shows in WWE, earlier in the week, Santino Marella, he made the announcement. It was actually a week ago. It was last Sunday at the live event in Toronto, which is where he lives, that he has retired as an active wrestler. He cited his history of neck problems, including, I guess there's a new issue with his neck that just creeped up on him, as the reason why he was hanging it up. I just made the comment on last week's podcast that Santino may not have much time left, and the very next day he announces his retirement. So this was not a big surprise, because it was already being murmured about. He recently opened up his own school in Toronto called the Battle Arts Academy for wrestling and MMA training. He did say he would be staying on with the company in a different capacity, whether that means as a GM or not, I don't know. I hope to God that's not the case. You know, as long as the authority is around, there is no need for a general manager. So I'm sure they could find a different role for him, maybe as an ambassador and do charity stuff. And I'm sure we have not seen the last of Santino on television. He'll pop up to do comedy cameos, kind of like Ron Simmons does. They'll trot him out there every now and then to say, damn! And then he'll disappear for 6 months. But just to look back on Santino's career, if this is it for him, you know, he signed a developmental deal with WWE back in 2005. And I answered a question not too long ago on this podcast about the Jim Cornette incident in, I think it was Ohio Valley, when Marella was there as one of the new students sitting in the audience. They were trying to get this boogeyman character over as this terrifying monster, and instead there's Marella sitting in the crowd laughing, trying to hold in his laughter, and Cornette just snapped. And backstage afterwards, he started smacking him around, and that really led to Cornette's dismissal from WWE, and he hasn't been back since. So that was a famous or infamous incident, I should probably say. He made his debut on television in 2007. Raw was in Milan, Italy. They had one of their rare international shows, and they decided to debut him as a local fan coming out of the crowd, and he wrestled Umaga for the Intercontinental title. Ended up winning the championship with an assist from Bobby Lashley. Hence his nickname, the Milan Miracle. That's where it came from. He would go on to hold the U.S. title. He was a tag team champion as well. Became one of the most popular, successful comedy characters in the history of that company. You know, he did a lot of fun things, especially early on in his run. I think his act kind of got old towards the end. He could still be very funny. You know, he was still good for comedy relief every now and then. But I just kind of get tired of his act more recently. He did things like the Honk-a-meter back when he was the Intercontinental Champion. He would keep track of his time as the champion. He was trying to break Honky Tonk Man's streak, which still stands, by the way. I think it's like 15 months as the Intercontinental Champion. He did the Glamourella pairing with Beth Phoenix, dressed up as a woman named Santina to win Miss WrestleMania. Still holds the record for fastest elimination in a Royal Rumble, 1.9 seconds. The Cobra gimmick, which he popularized, the Cobra sock puppet deal, was very popular at first. Then I just think it got way out of control. That stupid shit they did with 3MB and the Great Khali and the snake charming stuff, remember that? Just horrendous. Horrendous stuff. And when they paired Santino off with Emma and gave her a pink cobra, it just felt like a death sentence for the girl. Her not being with Santino anymore is a blessing. I know she has her other issues with what happened last week with the arrest and everything. Hopefully that's not held against her and that's behind her. And her not being with Santino will force them to come up with something better. I mean, I know the pairing with Santino got her TV time. Okay, she hasn't been on television in weeks without him. So you could say, well, the pairing with Santino was good for her because it actually got her on television. That's true, but now I'm hoping that this forces them to come up with something better for her to get her on television, you know? You can get TV time doing the stupidest shit in the world, but at what cost? You know, what damage is it doing to your career? I'd rather she be off TV until they actually find something productive for her to do, although I don't know, again, how the whole shoplifting stuff may affect that going forward. I guess we'll see how long it takes for her to get back on TV, and if she's doing jobs or if they actually come up with a program for her. My favorite Santino memory, if I had to pick one, easily was the Tea Time with Santino segment they did with him and Sheamus and Kozlov on Raw from the UK. I want to say that was back in 2010. It was either 3 or 4 years ago. That right there is an example of comedy done right in WWE. And I think Sheamus at one point was kind of corpsing on camera, trying so hard not to laugh. Even he found it funny. You could find that segment, I'm sure, on YouTube. It was great, and it was probably my favorite thing that Santino has been involved in. There was, a little period, those first couple of months in 2011, and that was the year they did the one and only 40-man Royal Rumble. Del Rio won that year. Think about that. Alberto Del Rio winning the Royal Rumble. The thought now of that is just comical. But Santino was the last guy in that Rumble match with Del Rio. And you would think, oh, that sucks. Santino's a jobber. What a way to build drama. But he was so over. Like, people loved him so much as that underdog, undercard character. Kind of like what Eric Young was for many years in TNA. That they wanted so desperately for him to win that Royal Rumble. There was no thought given to the fact that the winner of this match is going to go on to headline WrestleMania, and that could in fact be Santino Marella. People just wanted to see him win. It was actually one of the better Rumble finishes they've ever done, especially in terms of how loud the crowd was for it. Because I think Santino was kind of forgotten about, and Del Rio threw somebody out. They thought he won, but then in the background you see Santino, and he's putting the Cobra thing on, and it's like, holy shit, I forgot he was even in the match. And you thought for a split second he might win. Of course he didn't, but you thought he might. And that was cool. And the following month, he actually ended up in one of the Elimination Chamber matches for the World Heavyweight title. He won a Battle Royal to earn a spot in the Chamber match. Randy Orton was out with a concussion. They had a spot that needed to be filled, so they had this Battle Royal. He won. He went to the match. And if I remember correctly, I think he was, much like the Rumble with Del Rio, he was the last guy in there with Daniel Bryan, who was the world champion at the time. And people were going nuts. I remember the crowd heat for the end of that Chamber match was off the charts. It's fucking Daniel Bryan back when he was, nobody. And Santino Marella, and the people are going nuts like it's the main event of WrestleMania. And they were hoping he might win, and then he got locked in the S-lock, or the LaBelle lock, it might have still been called at the time, and he tapped out. But that was probably the most high-profile period for him in his entire career. He was, in the Rumble match at the very end. He was in a Chamber match on pay-per-view, getting a pay-per-view payoff, wrestling for the world title. I don't think he ever quite got back up to that level, but hey, when they put him in there, he delivered, and the people were into it, and you got to give him that. So, to me, those two matches, the Tea Time segment on Raw, those are my most memorable memories of Santino Marella. And, all the best to him. Hopefully he gets his neck fixed. It's not fun having neck problems. A lot of guys, Edge, have had their careers end because of their neck. I don't know if the surgery he needs is major spinal fusion surgery or if it's, maybe not so serious. That I don't know. And I hope they keep him around, again, for cameos every now and then. I don't need to see him as the GM, or I don't need to see him on television every week. But I think when he looks back on his career, and I'm sure he is, he's got nothing to be ashamed of. He had a hell of a run. For a guy in his position, an undercard comedy guy, to have, 8 years on the main roster, and a lot of times doing stuff that, was pretty important or people were into. Not too many people can say that. So I think when you really look back on it, he had a pretty good run.